The power of the I you're not using and how it can redefine your life in 30 days. What if I told you there's a hidden version of yourself, quiet but incredibly powerful, capable of completely redefining your life in just 30 days? Most people never discover this potential because they believe that who they are today is all they can ever be. That's the mistake that traps millions in the same cycle of frustration, doubt, and surrender. But the truth is, you are not a fixed label. You're not just a collection of repeated habits over time. You are a field of possibilities, one that can be reprogrammed, trained, and awakened. In this video, you'll understand what it truly means to access the power of the I, a force present in every decision you make and every habit you repeat. We're not talking about temporary motivation or empty promises, but about a process that behavioral science has already proven to be real. Transformation doesn't begin when you change the world around you. It begins when you update the identity that drives every single one of your choices. Imagine for a moment that within you there's a switch that's never been turned on. That switch is the key to the discipline you've always wanted, the clarity that's been missing from your days, the courage to break old patterns and build a different life. Over the next few minutes, you'll discover how to find that switch, activate it, and, most importantly, keep it on until it becomes impossible to return to your old self. You're about to step into a rarely explored territory, the territory of the self in progress, the you that refuses to be limited by the past and can be trained each day, like a muscle that grows and strengthens. This video is your map to activating that power, and if you apply what you learn here in 30 days, you'll recognize a new pattern, a new identity, and a new way of existing within yourself. Deconstructing the myth of the current self. From an early age, we're led to believe our identity is fixed, as if every experience we live, every mistake we make, and every habit we repeat chisels an unchangeable statue of who we are. We grow up hearing phrases like, "He's always been that way," "That's just how I am," or "People don't change, they only reveal who they really are." These statements carry a silent weight because they shape how we come to see ourselves. It's as if we're trapped inside a frame, and every attempt to step outside it is considered useless. But that belief is profoundly mistaken, and it's the main reason why so many people live far below their true potential. The so-called current self is nothing more than an accumulated reflection of the choices and repetitions you've made so far. It's not a life sentence. It's simply a photograph taken at a specific moment in your story. The problem is, most people look at that photograph and believe it represents their final essence. When you say, "I'm disorganized," "I'm anxious," or "I'm undisciplined," you're not describing eternal traits. You're describing the result of unconscious training you've reinforced over time. Each time you repeat an action, you leave a mark. Over time, those marks combine to form the portrait of your current self. The problem arises when you confuse the portrait with your essential identity. Your current self is not who you are, it's who you've been. And that difference is enormous. Believing your identity is permanent closes doors, while understanding it as the result of repetition opens the door to transformation. If you've unconsciously trained yourself to be anxious, you can train yourself to be calm. If you've trained procrastination, you can train focus. If you've trained yourself to quit early, you can train persistence. Every pattern is like a muscle. It only exists because you've exercised it. What many people fail to realize is that the same principle applies to the creation of new identity muscles. Visualize your identity as a mirror. The reflection you see is nothing but the sum of your recent actions. It doesn't reveal your potential. It only reflects what you've practiced frequently. If you've reinforced limiting patterns up to now, the mirror shows a limited image. But if, starting today, you begin to practice actions aligned with the version of who you want to become, that reflection will soon change. The mirror has no will of its own. It only shows what you offer it. That's the key to understanding that your identity is fluid. When we speak of the current self versus the self in progress, we're talking about this very boundary. The current self is static. It's the photograph. The self in progress is dynamic. It's the movie in motion. The first ties you to the past. The second opens the way to the future. Many people live under the illusion that they must break their current self, as if they need to destroy who they are to become someone new. That creates resistance, fear, and paralysis. What truly works is not breaking, it's training. Training means consciously repeating the patterns you wish to adopt until they become natural. Think of your identity as a dormant muscle. If it's not stimulated, it stays weak, atrophied without energy. But once you apply consistent stimulation, it awakens and begins to grow. Your current self is merely that muscle at rest. Your self in progress is the training process that strengthens it with each repetition. Over time, the new muscle becomes so strong that the old one no longer has the power to run your life. This is where you must ask yourself, how many of the labels you carry today are truly part of your essence, and how many are just accumulated habits? Are you really disorganized, or have you just practiced disorganization for years? Are you truly insecure, or have you reinforced that identity every time you held back instead of moving forward? Seen from that perspective, you realize your current self has no real power. It only occupies the space you've allowed it to. The self in progress is the decision to take control of that process. It's the choice to stop unconsciously repeating old patterns and begin consciously choosing the repetitions you want to keep. Transformation doesn't happen because you suddenly wake up as someone new. It happens because you repeat the actions of your new identity until they replace the old ones. The secret isn't waiting for a big breakthrough. It's feeding small daily repetitions that strengthen the self in progress. The myth of the current self only survives because you believe in it. It's reinforced every time you say, "That's just how I am." But when you understand that every habit is a form of training, and every training shapes identity, the myth collapses. You begin to see your current self not as a final destination, but as a starting point. That realization is liberating, because it shows that change doesn't depend on luck, talent, or external circumstances. It depends on the conscious training of who you choose to become starting today. The hidden secret of the power of the I. There's a silent force behind every decision, every behavior, and every pattern you repeat daily. That force is the identity you assume, consciously or unconsciously. What you believe yourself to be shapes how you think, feel, and act. And that's exactly where the hidden secret of the power of the I lies. Most people try to change their lives from the surface by adjusting isolated behaviors, when the true root of transformation is the identity that sustains those behaviors. When someone says, "I'm going to start waking up early," but still sees themselves as lazy, the mind resists. The action clashes with the identity. It's like rowing against the current, a lot of effort, but short-lived results. On the other hand, when identity changes first, habits stop feeling like external impositions and start flowing naturally. Waking up early stops being a battle when you see yourself as someone who values energy and discipline. Eating well stops feeling like punishment when you identify as someone who cares for their body. Working consistently stops being a sacrifice when you believe you're the kind of person who honors commitments. The great secret is this: the human mind doesn't clearly distinguish between reality and repeated imagination. When you repeatedly visualize a behavior, consistently affirm that you are already that kind of person, and act accordingly, your brain records that identity as real. Neurons form new connections, and gradually the old pattern loses strength. It's as if you were updating the software that runs your behavior, replacing a buggy, outdated program with a new, more efficient system. This explains why so many attempts at change fail. People try to swap habits without changing the foundation that sustains them. It's like trying to plant a new tree in soil that was never prepared. The roots can't take hold and the tree dies. But when identity changes, the soil is ready. Habits become natural fruits of that new soil. You don't need to force every action. They sprout naturally from what you already believe yourself to be. Think of how this applies to your life. If you believe you're someone who can't stay focused, you'll sabotage every attempt at productivity. If you believe you can't control anxiety, your body will respond with symptoms at the first sign of pressure. If you believe you're undisciplined, you'll quit at the first obstacle. Now imagine the opposite, believing you're a self in progress, someone training discipline, learning to manage anxiety, developing focus. That belief creates room for evolution because it turns every challenge into part of your training, not proof of your incapacity. The hidden secret of the power of the I is understanding that identity is not just a reflection, it's a command. It doesn't only describe who you are, it determines who you become. Every time you say, "I'm the kind of person who," and complete the sentence with your desired identity, you're sending a direct order to your brain. With repetition, that order becomes an automatic pattern. That's how invisible habits are born, the ones you don't even have to think about, yet they silently sustain your life. What's most fascinating is that this process doesn't require radical overnight change. It depends on small conscious choices repeated day after day, choices that feed your new identity. Each time you reaffirm yourself in progress, even through a small action, you weaken your current self. The old pattern loses power because it no longer receives energy. And when your energy changes direction, transformation becomes inevitable. That's why the most powerful question isn't, "What do I want to change?" It's, "Who do I want to become?" When that answer becomes clear, habits stop being a struggle and start becoming a natural consequence. The hidden secret of the power of the I is understanding that you're not merely the result of your actions, you are the identity you choose to reinforce every single day. The 30-day challenge, reprogramming the I. Now that you understand how your identity shapes every result in your life, it's time to activate the practical side of this transformation. The next 30 days won't be about changing everything at once. They'll be about training the new I through small, conscious and strategic repetitions. Here's the rule that separates those who truly transform from those who stay in theory. Transformation isn't an event, it's a system. And this system follows 3 key steps that must be practiced daily for 30 days. 1. Define yourself in progress. You can't train what you haven't defined. Most people say, "I want to change," but they don't specify who they want to become. That lack of clarity is what causes most attempts to fail. You can't train an identity that doesn't exist yet in your awareness. So the first step is to define the new I you'll train for the next 30 days. Write down in one clear sentence the version of yourself you'll commit to embody. I am training to become someone who... Examples. I am training to become someone who honors my word. I am training to become someone who finishes what I start. I am training to become someone who takes care of my body and my mind. It's important that this sentence reflects something you want to become, not something you want to stop being. The brain doesn't understand negation, it only understands direction. So instead of saying, "I don't want to be lazy anymore," say, "I am becoming someone who values movement and consistency." Once you define it, repeat it every day, preferably out loud, right after waking up and before going to sleep. This repetition activates a neurological mechanism called identity priming, a form of programming that makes the brain seek behaviors aligned with what it has been affirming. You're not lying to yourself when you say it. You're training yourself to believe it, and belief is the first spark that ignites transformation. 2. Align actions with your new identity. Once your new I is defined, every day becomes an opportunity to reinforce it through micro-actions. You don't need massive changes. You need small, consistent choices that align with the I you're training. If your I is someone disciplined, every time you follow through on a task, even a small one, you're strengthening that identity. If your I is someone who takes care of your body, every meal, every walk, every conscious choice becomes a form of training. If your I is someone emotionally stable, every time you pause before reacting, you're building the muscle of your new identity. Here's what most people get wrong. They want to feel like the new person before acting like one. But the correct order is the opposite. You act first and the feeling follows. Behavior creates emotion, not the other way around. Every action aligned with your new identity sends your brain evidence, and evidence builds conviction. That's how the I becomes real, through small proofs that accumulate until they replace the old narrative. So every night, ask yourself a simple question. What action did I take today that confirmed the I I'm training? It doesn't matter if it was big or small. What matters is that it was intentional. Each repetition rewires your brain. Each repetition strengthens your new identity. 3. Track and reaffirm progress. Change that isn't tracked fades into forgetfulness. To make your new I solid, you need to see evidence of growth. That's why for the next 30 days you'll keep an identity journal, a simple record of what you practiced and how you responded. Each day write down your identity statement. I am training to become someone who. One concrete action that reinforced that I. One small obstacle you overcame. This exercise is more powerful than it seems. It keeps your attention anchored in progress instead of perfection. It trains your brain to recognize evolution instead of self-criticism. And most importantly, it prevents you from falling back into autopilot. At the end of 30 days, when you reread your notes, you'll realize something extraordinary. You didn't just change your behavior, you updated your self-image. And when your self-image changes, the entire structure of your life rearranges itself around it. The moment of identity. Expansion. There comes a day, somewhere between repetition and reflection, when you notice something subtle but profound. You no longer need to force the new behavior. You've become the kind of person who does it naturally. That's the moment when transformation stops being effort and starts being identity. It's the invisible threshold between training and embodiment, between trying and being. It's like when someone who used to struggle to wake up early one day just wakes up without resistance. Or when someone who used to avoid challenges suddenly feels drawn to them. Or when someone who used to procrastinate now feels uncomfortable, not taking action. What changed wasn't willpower. It was identity. Because once you become the kind of person who behaves in a certain way, you don't have to force it anymore. It becomes who you are. That's the true goal of the 30-day challenge. Not to prove you can resist temptation for a month, but to build neural and emotional foundations strong enough that your new I becomes self-sustaining. And once that happens, you'll understand something that no book or motivational video can give you. You never lacked discipline. You only lacked the right identity to express it through. From the current self to the self in progress. Your current self is a story written by repetition. Your self in progress is a story being rewritten by consciousness. Every day you repeat an action aligned with your new identity, you're erasing a sentence from the old story and writing a new one. And that story doesn't depend on your past, it depends on your persistence. There's no external force more powerful than an individual who understands that identity is trainable, because once you control your I, you control your destiny. That's why this is not just another challenge, it's a declaration. I am no longer the result of my old repetitions. I am the author of the new ones that will define my life from today on. Repeat this as often as necessary, not as an affirmation, but as a remembrance of your power. Final message: the power is already yours. At this very moment, there are two versions of you coexisting. The one shaped by the past, the current self, and the one being born through your choices, the self in progress. Both are real, but only one deserves your energy. Every time you choose an action that reinforces your new identity, you're voting for the future version of yourself. Each small vote counts, and consistency is what determines the winner. 30 days from now, when you look back, you'll realize that you didn't just change habits. You awakened a dormant power that was always within you, the power to define who you are becoming. So, as of today, stop saying, "That's just how I am." Start saying, "That's who I'm training to become." Because identity isn't destiny. It's a decision you renew every day through action. And when that truth becomes real to you, you'll finally understand that the greatest transformation of your life doesn't come from the world outside. It comes from the power of the I that you decide to awaken within yourself.